Hi, I'm Mike Litton, and this is your market update. So just a real quick recap from last month's numbers that we've been looking at. New listings were down 20.9, closed sales were down 21.5, median home price was at 949, average sales price 1,267,168. Price received 98.6%, so a $986,000 risk, basically closing on $1 million listing. Affordability was down 12.1%, which obviously we talked about was interest rates. Months of supply went up to 3.6%, which now is going to change, and I'll show you why in a minute. There's the 50-year graph where you see the peak behind me, and then that's last year, and then this is the most recent. 6.75 is the current interest rate. VA and FHA interest rates are currently at 5.75. The APR is 5.99%, so it's a little bit higher on the APR because the closing costs are a little bit higher. That's accounting points, but so it's 5.75 on FHA and on VA 30-year fixed. Conventional is about 6.25 currently, so it's about half a percent less than the 6.75 that you see, and you see the graph behind me in terms of what's happened in the last 3 months, and you can see that little blip there where it's changed. So weekly snapshot, this is very interesting numbers. So weekly snapshot, there are 2,920 homes on the market now versus this time last week there were 2,880, which is an increase of 1.39%. Not really that big a deal, but listen to this. You've got 1,999 homes currently new listings on the market versus 654 last week. So same time last week, you're up 68.04% in new listings in 1 month, or 1 week, I mean. That's an amazing number. So inventory is starting to pick up. We're getting into the buying season early. Usually the buying season, for those of you that have been following me, is usually the end of February. We're roaring into it at the third week of January, obviously. So, and also pendings are up 4.5%. So the 2,060 pendings this week versus last week, same time, 1972. So consumer sentiment, remember University of Washington, this is why you're seeing the peak that you're seeing in terms of home sales and demand. You're starting to see more and more escrows opening, and you're starting to see more and more buyers entering the market because of interest rates and because of what we're going to talk about in a minute, which is an anticipation of the Fed reducing interest rates. We're talking about that here in just a second. So we talked about those numbers. Those numbers are just amazing from the University of Michigan. Fed cuts interest rates. These are the chances of them cutting interest rates. Now, this is not me talking. This is Wall Street. So this is Wall Street experts that know a lot more than I do about this. This is what they're doing in terms of handicapping, if you will, what it is that the Fed's going to do next. So in March, they believe that the Fed, 53% of the experts on Wall Street believe, that contribute to this survey, believe that the Fed's going to lower interest rates by a quarter. So they lower interest rates by a quarter. Remember, that's short-term interest rates, not long-term. So long-term interest rates can follow short-term interest rates, but usually it's the short-term interest rates that instantly reduce. So if we come down by a quarter of a point, the prime immediately that day will follow the Fed. So if they reduce by a quarter, the prime rate will drop. Now, what happens when the prime rate drops, for those of you that have been following me, when the prime rate drops by a quarter, it costs less for corporations to borrow money. It costs less money for you to go out and get a car loan, for you to go out and get credit cards, that kind of thing. And so it's bullish. It's something that people get bullish about. That's why you saw the sentiment numbers from University of Michigan. People are anticipating that the Fed's going to be reducing interest rates. Those sentiment numbers came out after the Fed announced last month that they were going to be cutting interest rates potentially 3 times in the next year. So that's part of that whole phenomenon. So you've got a quarter point, 53% believe it'll be a quarter point in March. Now they came out today, just so you know, the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, came out today and said that they're not in any hurry and that March doesn't look likely. But there's still 53% of the street thinks that they're going to lower by a quarter. In May, 47% believe they're going to lower by a quarter. In June, 47% believe they're going to lower by a half. So in other words, by the time we get to June, 47% of the respondents believe we'll be at a half a point lower as far as the Fed funds rate, which means the prime will be a half a point lower. And then in July, they're looking for 0.75. So they're actually factoring in 3/4 point, if you will, reductions in the Fed funds rate by the Federal Reserve. That it's a target that they target, but they'd be lowering it and the prime would follow. So In July, 45% of the respondents believe that we're going to be 0.75% lower than we are now in terms of the target for the Fed funds rate. So something to think about in terms of what the public is thinking and what they're saying publicly, and then what the experts on Wall Street are saying. And then this is just a real quick reminder: we want to be solution based when we're talking about housing and when we're talking about situations that people are in because of the market. So just a couple of things just reminders. You can do a VA with no down and no closing costs right now. You can also do an FHA where all of the closing costs, all of the down payment, and all of the reserves can all be a gift. So zero out of pocket. And remember, you're at 5.75% interest rates currently on a 30-year fixed rate for FHA and with VA. One other thing, if interest rates drop after you do an FHA or VA loan, you can do a thing called a streamlined refinance, where you don't have to put income documentation, you don't have to have an appraisal, you don't have to do a lot of things in order to actually drop that rate. So that streamlined refinance is a low-cost, convenient way on an FHA or a VA loan to be able to lower the interest rate, lower your risk, and lower your payment. So something to think about in terms of what you opt for in terms of the financing that you opt for to buy a house. So Fannie Mae, remember that 5% down, we talked about that, and FHA and VA, like I mentioned, 5.75, and the APR is up to 5.99%. So real quick update on the podcast. We are today surpassing 40,000 listens on the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you for listening. I really, really appreciate all of you jumping in. We're now in 24 countries around the world, and we've been listened to 40,000 times. And what they have a thing called an impactful listen, where there's a percentage of your listeners that listen 75% or more of the podcast. We're at 71%. So 71% of you listen to more than 3/4, 75% or more of our podcast episodes. And some of those, you guys, are over an hour. So thank you from the bottom of our heart. At our current pace, we're going to break 500,000 listens this year. How cool is that? I really could not thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you. Don't forget our YouTube channel. It's Mike Litton 3375. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Litton Realty. If you want to meet with me, go to calendly.com/REO760. Now you'll see that we've branded it for the podcast. So it's 4 podcast episodes of podcast interviews, but you can go there and you can reserve an hour. We moved it up from a half an hour to an hour. You can reserve an hour with me, no charge, no obligation. We'll answer all the questions that you have. There are no questions you cannot ask, including how we get paid and everything, right? I'm more than happy to be completely open and transparent with you and tell you exactly how this works. One of the things that you can count on with me is you can always count on that I'm going to tell you the truth. It just may not be what you want to hear. So a very, very good friend of mine who used to be our pastor used to tell people when they came to see me for counseling, he would say, just be prepared. You're going to go talk to him. He's going to tell you the truth and it's going to sting. And every single one of them got back to him and said, it stung, but he did tell us the truth. So just be aware. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what's really going on. So you're more than welcome to meet with me. I'd love to meet with you. And I'd love to answer any questions you have. You can call me, of course, at 760-522-1227. 760-522-1227. I hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week. Take care.